Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to the Human Echoes recap for Channel Zero, The No End House, Episode 4, Exit. And this, just talking about the title is a good place to mention that I continue to be impressed with how little this show messes around. Like, when you see episode 4 of what you know is going to be a 6-part series, you think to yourself, the title might be Exit, but there's no way they're actually going to, get out of the house in this episode. That wouldn't make any sense. But they do. And when you see, these people that the house created having emotions and feelings, your first instinct is, well, there's probably some kind of manipulation. There's no way the house gave these things actual autonomy, these weird memory eaters. They must be monsters that are faking it. And then, no, they're not. And then you see some weird stuff happen and you think, well, maybe this is just some kind of dreamscape. But no, there's still physical reality within the house. There's a tangibility to this story that I really dig. And it was very unexpected for me from a creepypasta story like No End House, right? Especially coming off of the previous series they did, which was pretty good, Candle Cove, where it felt like the logic was a lot more dreamy and things could just sort of pop into existence whenever they wanted to. Here, there's a much more concrete foundation that they're building on. And they're not afraid to keep building up and building onto new ideas onto the old ideas. And to do that in a 6-episode arc where you could just sort of tread water and be like, we got some spooky stuff, and then get to the end and have a big finale and be done, is really impressive. The storytelling is great in this series. So this episode kicks off with everybody kind of waking up from the events of the previous episode, right? Margot and Seth are in bed together. Margot's like, not usually have sex on the before first date kind of girl, but things are weird here. I continue to be okay with this, just as a sort of people are complicated and need comfort and sex sometimes, and maybe she's just out of her mind and needs something to take it off of her mind. And it's not as strong as it could be, but I do think this episode does a good job of establishing that these are two people that legitimately like each other. They don't have, as actors, a lot of chemistry, but this episode at least tries to build up some kind of relationship there to justify what has just happened between them. Meanwhile, the most interesting part of the last episode continues for me with Dylan and his wife in the kitchen. Dylan has his wife tied up with zip ties. He's still trying to convince her that they had a life together and that she loves him and that he loves her and that everything's hunky-dory. And she manipulates him. She acts like any hostage being taken by a crazy person who claims he's your husband, but he's obviously not, because you would remember that would, and acts like she remembers. And gets him to cut the bonds because he so badly wants her to be back to who she was. And she cuts, she gets loose and almost instantly is taking a knife to him. That dynamic is so just tragic. And especially how it plays out here is really, really rough for Dylan. Going forward, they move on in the morning. I guess I should also mention that Margot finds Jules in the garage after her incident with the egg, and Jules doesn't seem to remember, or at least she's not telling Margot what's happening with what she's doing with the egg. They get together, Margot asks some questions and Jules is like, oh, and I don't know if that's a ploy or if she just legitimately doesn't remember, but they get going, they're walking out of the house, they have their plan, they're headed toward the exit, and it is actually the exit, right? This is not a fake out. They're not but it wasn't the exit, bum, bum, bum. There actually is an exit. And they're walking through these neighborhoods similar to what we saw in like the cold open of the show, right? Where Dylan's wife was walking through a neighborhood and started to run and somebody chased her down and dragged her back into the house. They're walking along and the people in the neighborhoods start looking at them and saying, what's going on? There's a little detail in here that I almost missed, but there's a couple of boys and their mother, and the mom calls out to the boys, it's breakfast, come to breakfast. And the breakfast that they come for is not bacon and eggs, right? We don't see them go inside the house. She goes onto the lawn, kneels down, and we see them lean in towards her head as if they're going to be taking some of her memories, possibly. I could be wrong about this, okay? But let's spin out the possibilities if I'm right here. If that one little moment is an accurate representation of what's going on in the house, and what we find out about Seth later is all basically true. Because Seth reveals to Margot that he's a person. And some of you guys were close to this idea in the comments. You were saying that Seth is like a construct that this house sends out and it, brings people back in. Almost, you were close, but no, apparently there are humans who choose to live in the house. I mean, at least one. We only know for sure about Seth, but it seems like there are other humans that have chosen to forget. I mean, and this goes back to what Seth said in the previous episode, or maybe the episode before, about you can choose to forget. Now those words take on new meaning because we know that he had memories that he didn't want to live with. Memories of this foster family that apparently were very painful for him. He goes into the house, and these memory eater things that the house creates for the people that live in it have taken these memories, and Seth feels like he's better off. And to spin that out into what we see with the mom and her two sons, what if there's, she's living in this place and there's a memory of losing these two boys, and these memory eater things are her way of coping, that she allows them to take her memories and slowly sap her dry just so that she can live without the grief. Right? If the No End House is a metaphor for the grieving process, or maybe not a metaphor exactly, but a commentary on the grieving process, there are people who would just rather forget, who would rather become that husk of the girl that we saw in episode 2 that JD was with, and just be nothing than deal with the pain of grief. They get out of the suburb. The people in the suburb do not follow them. And I don't know for sure if... My guess is that these are all humans, or most of them anyway, who want people to stay in the house, probably because they don't want to give up all their memories. Like, if you have more people's memories to feed to the memory eaters, then you do better. Like, you can stay for longer. But they walk to the edge of the road. They do not continue because they're not interested in leaving the house. They just want people to stay in the house. And we see then the father thing, who was not killed in that pit. I don't think anybody really thought he was going to be. Walk to the edge of the road and then keep going. He is hungry. He needs to get to Margot. He needs to get some memories. But he's also, as we're going to find out later, not just a monster. Again, just love where they're going with so much of this stuff. They get to a corn maze. It gets dark, right? It's really beautiful cinematography here, I want to point out. Like, there's a shot where they're walking in front of like a tree with some fog, and just sort of logistically, I was thinking, is that CG fog? Did they just happen to have a really great foggy morning? How did they manage to do that? But it looks great, whatever it is. Here again, you have some really beautiful nighttime visuals. This corn maze sign lit up all orange, giving you that sort of pop in the background. It's nighttime, but then they decided not to go into the corn maze because it's a corn maze at nighttime and there's people who need memories wandering around in there. And they build a fire, and some of this was a little bit, I will admit, difficult for me to see because my TV is not like high definition range. It's an LDR. It's like kind of crappy on the amount of blacks and different shades of gray that it will render. But the bravery, I would say, of putting something like that that's so dark, but with those pops of color and pops of light and just sort of the really subtle darkness on screen in a television show is really cool. But things, of course, go bad. Not JD. Seth talks to Margot and reveals to her what he is, as we sort of already established, that he's this human that's been in the house. He uses a great metaphor, by the way. We're going back to orchids, and I did not look this up to see if it's a real thing, and I apologize, but it's cool within the show, an orchid mantis. This idea of a thing that mimics an orchid, but isn't really an orchid, is such a great, pile on to all the other sort of wonderful metaphors that we already have of what's going on here with Seth and the house. And Seth expresses what I believe is genuine regret to Margot, saying, I like you. I'm disappointed now that I'm bringing you into this house. I know that you're going to get eaten by these memory eaters, and that's kind of a bummer, because now that I've met you and sort of gotten into you as a friend and as, in a sexual sense, maybe I would rather that didn't happen, but I'm an agent of the house and I need this, so I'm sorry. In the meantime, when this confession is going on, one of the memory eaters wanders out of the maze. I think memory eater. That's the best I can come up with, although she's stuck in kind of a feedback loop. She's just yelling, "Darling, darling, darling." I don't know if we're seeing different stages of memory eater starvation. Earlier on, as they're sort of trekking through the field, there was a really creepy thing they see where one of these things is just sunken into the ground. I don't know. I don't know if that's makeup or they really found a super skinny dude, but just emaciated face and body of this guy, just expiring, unable to move, but still somehow alive as he breathes out. Well, I don't know about his last. I don't know if these things can die or if they just turn into these husks that can't move because they don't have memories. Man, that would suck. Anyway, so we're getting these different visions into what it looks like as the memory eaters lose memories and don't have enough to eat. And one of the memory eaters comes out of the maze and attacks Dylan's wife as Dylan is off trying to get Jules, who's wandered off from the fire. In the meantime of that, the memory eater kills her. Dylan comes and chases her off. They realize that JD, or JT, I've been saying JD, I'm just going to stick with that. But I now that he's gone from the show, I'm pretty sure that he's actually JT. I was wrong. Somebody pronounced it really hard in this episode, and I was like, oh, I've been wrong this whole time. But that he's revealed as one of these things. Dylan stabs him in the gut, and we get another one of these sort of I'm a real thing. I don't I killed my doppelganger. That was a bad move, but this actually hurts. We're not just some robot automatons that can't be hurt. These are real feelings for us, and the desperation that I feel about not having any memories to eat is also real. I need to get out of the house, which is, Seth tells him it's not going to help him, but he thinks that it might. Dylan straight up doesn't care, though. He burns him with some starter fluid that he had in his backpack, I guess, and you just get this memory eater burning to death and screaming. In the meantime, Jules has wandered off. Margot goes to find her. She sees her communing with the egg thing that is stealing her memories, and kind of I need more answers here. And I'm hoping that that's going to be our big sort of reveal in episode late 5 and early 6 of what's going on with Jules. But Margot pulls her away from this. We see one of those little husks that the memory eater creates sink back into the ground, which is even more creepy in the cornfield for some reason. I lost track of what happened to Seth. Either he ran off, or I thought maybe he got killed, but now that I'm thinking back, I don't believe that actually happened. It's just the two girls and Dylan left, who are ostensibly good guys at this point. The two girls go into the house. Dylan stays outside with the intention of burning the whole thing down, where he is attacked, I believe by Seth, but I've forgotten and my notes are incomplete here. So Apologies on that one. I didn't realize there was a gap. But what I did love about the second house sequence was how that, I mean, a lot of the rooms are similar, right? We saw the first room and the second room, and they have the masks again. They have the sort of things being pulled out of the masks, I guess as a symbol of their memories sort of being partially pulled out. In the second room, there's the stuff, the ichor that spreads out. It looks like a tree kind of in the pattern in the floor of the pool room, and tries to separate Margot and Jules. And Jules, if you'll recall from episode 1, or I think episode 2 actually, had left Margot behind after her dad's suicide and was unable to sort of go with her through the grief. They had separated in their first grieving process. And now it's like the house is giving them a second chance to grieve, to go through this process. And the difference now is that they go through it together. And while there is still creepiness in what they see in the house, it's diminished a lot by the fact that they're experiencing this together. The cool part, the third room that they experience is the school, where apparently this was Jules's nightmare, but with a little tinge of Margot's, because Jules had been freaked out by one of the teachers that they had at one point. And then you see that the teacher's face is the same face of the guy from Margot's dream in her third room, which was the hallway with the guy behind the mirror. I thought that was a great touch, and that was very, very creepy. But they get through that, they stick together, they go in the triangle room where they see Jules's dad's face as he chokes and puffs up. And then the final room with the clay thing, who's also some representation of her dad, and the bathtub, and they get out. They get out into the real world. And I'm just going to assume this is the real world, guys, okay? I know that the house could be playing some kind of trick on us, and I know that sort of the no-end house shtick is that you kind of just keep getting trapped up in it, but the rules of the house, as we have seen them so far, say that you can't start cars, and that you can't, just the way that it's presented feels more real to me. But, of course, that's not the end of the episode. Our big stinger is the father thing coming out of the house and into the real world, following the two girls, we would assume, back to their homes, trying to get Margot's memories. And he has this, there's an encounter from earlier in the episode where he pleads with Margot and says, I just need a little something, give me a little something. He's not interested in hurting her, right? He's compelled by this hunger for memories that he has, but he is, he doesn't want to do something bad to his daughter. He has been created with this from her memories, and as a memory of her father, he cares about her. He's a legit caring, wants to do good for his daughter dad, except also he needs to eat her memories really, really badly. And he's starting to lose control. He tells them in the corn maze when he confronts them, he tells them to run away right before he starts really just going full, crazy person on him and chasing him through the maze. And now here he is, the starving memory eater in the world, in the real world. I don't know where that goes. Where do you go? We've got 2 more episodes. I'm assuming at some point they have to go back one more time into the house. And by the way, love the, just to sort of sidetrack, I love the, as Jules and Margot exit the house, they see the 2 guys that are trying to get in, and they are now the shell-shocked people walking away from the house. Just you don't want to do that. Although they could have reacted a little bit more strongly, I felt, to some of the stuff that happened in the episode. You should really be freaking out about some of this stuff at this point. But I'll write that off. It fits in with the dreamlike quality of the show. But I don't know where this goes. What? My wife was watching this with me, and she had a great question. This thing looks like Margot's dad. And people in the real world know who he is and that he's not still alive. And I think her mom is still around, I think. I don't think she's living in the house by herself, although I could be wrong. How's that going to play out? Can he just get arrested by the police? Is he going to infect people in the real world somehow? Now that there's a memory eater out of the house, can more memory eaters come out? all kinds of bonkers and fun questions that I don't have the answers to, but I cannot wait to find out what these last 2 episodes of the No End House have in store for us. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you liked the video. If you did, click that like button. Leave a comment if you have theories or things that I missed, especially if anybody remembers what happened to Seth, because I really feel bad about not having that in my notes. But apparently he's either dead or not. I think he attacked Dylan. That was bad on my part. Anyway, I'll see you guys next week with another episode of the No End House recap. Take care, y'all.